On the 6th of June 2024, Hearts of Iron 4 released a teaser titled What Lies Ahead, presumably alluding to some future DLC content relating to atomic weaponry. On the 6th of June 2016, Hearts of Iron 4 released on Steam. While it's good to see continued support for the game, it's also true that the game is now 8 years old, and the obvious question is rising. Crusader Kings 2 has gotten a Crusader Kings 3, Victoria 2 has gotten a Victoria 3, even Europa Universalis 4 has gotten a strange follow-up in the ever so secretive Project Caesar. When will there be a Hearts of Iron 5? Alas, I can bear no answer, but I did want to talk briefly about the possibility of a sequel and some key factors to consider, as well as some things I personally would hope to see, if not to any impact, at least to settle the discussion in my head alone and to know what could be some early stumbling blocks. So, shall we begin? Let's start this discussion with what I believe to be the silver bullet that could kill HoI 5 before it's even released, and that is feature parity with HoI 4. If we take a look towards another game, Crusader Kings 3, we can see that one of the largest complaints that game has is the lack of X feature or Y feature from its predecessor CK2. As a result, the devs are in a constant uphill battle trying to fill the gap between the two games, while players will lament on playing a sequel when the prequel has the content they want to play already. Now, imagine Hearts of Iron 5 doing the same thing. It releases with no agency mechanics, no peace-deal menus, no designers for tanks and planes, the supply system is minimal, there is finite diplomatic interactions between nations. While this really hurt Crusader Kings 3, the amount of love and support for HoI 4, especially in terms of modding, could honestly just be a disaster for the release of the game, with everybody wanting to remain with Hearts of Iron 4. Simply put, it seems to me the best option for any future game is to ensure that in some form the content and ideas in the current game are carried over to the next game, so there is at minimum an equal amount of content between the two. It would seem that the direction of EU5 or Project Caesar endeavours to deliver this, although how successful they will be remains a mystery, so we can hope Paradox would do this with a HoI 5 too, because of course at the end of the day, the product will have to justify the price tag. Next up, I have something that might be more controversial. Something I'd like to see change is the pacing of the game to be a little bit more stretched on either side of the start and end dates. What I mean by this is pushing the start date back to perhaps 1933 when Adolf became Chancellor, and pushing the end date of content back to the mid to the late 1950s. My justification for an earlier start date is that throughout the development of DLCs for HoI 4, we have seen the player base's desire to play through and design their own nation's story beyond the rigid structure of World War II. While this is enjoyable, the game still maintains a relatively consistent time frame of 3.5 years till the outbreak of Danziger War, even if things are ahistorical and all bets are off. If players are wanting to, for example, return the Kaiser or set certain nations down radical ideological routes, it may be worth looking into giving a greater time frame to actually explore these narratives with a longer early game, as to avoid feeling the need to rush a domestic shift in the face of international threats. The other side of this coin is about the end of the game, what it is and what it means. As it stands right now, the end of the game is quite spurious beyond absolute world conquest, and if the Allies win historically, we fail to see the kind of stabilisation and reconstruction period of society while a transition happens to covert politics in the threat of nuclear annihilation. Currently, the game does have nuclear bombs, it does have spies and agencies, but it doesn't really have a reconstruction phase where troops are disbanded and victory of certain factions is assumed. This is something I'd really love to see expanded in a future game going on towards the 1950s so that the true victors are seen across the map. The scale of the map is actually one of the most prominent features I consider for a future title, because it's something that is exclusively built from the ground up of a new release. As it stands right now, I feel that parts of the Hoi 4 map feel too claustrophobic. For example, the conflicts of Central America take place on a static line of adjacent tiles that make for very uninteresting conflict. This was an issue that was purposefully avoided in crafting the Amazon region for Trials of Allegiance between the Amazon River. Alternatively, the United Kingdom can be seen as being way too tight for space, that as a result, the tiles of major cities are just all connected to each other, meaning you can literally walk from Liverpool all the way to Birmingham and never leave a victory point. It's very, very small. So with this, I'm not asking for a gigantic increase in scale to the map. While bigger can often mean bigger, it also means more tiles to defend, which means more units to micro, and that comes with a horde of issues from overwhelming army management to game performance issues. Still, taking that into account, I would still argue the game could benefit from an increase in scale up to around like a doubling of the current size. There are some really interesting consequences that could come from this, such as cities being spread over a series of tiles instead of being localized to being an isolated urban point on a single tile on the map. There will of course be some criticism to overrepresenting the size of major cities on the map comparative to the size of the world, but I really think the benefits of a gameplay experience far outweigh any geographic perfections. Imagine fighting for Stalingrad as it exists not as just one small unseen victory point, but as 5 connected urban tiles with buildings and fortifications over the riverline, the Soviets on one side inside Stalingrad, the Germans on the other side of the river, still in Stalingrad. Alternatively, imagine taking Paris, not as one random tile as a capital, but as maybe 3 or 4 tiles, and on the south side of the Seine you can see the Eiffel Tower, the key victory point to take over the riverline. Size isn't everything, but with scale, it's nothing to be scoffed at either. Keeping in theme with building the map, I wanted to touch briefly on what to me is a constant annoyance of Hoi 4, and that is inconsistent states. As it is currently, states are static boundaries that make up nations. They are determined in size by whatever the developers have chosen to best suit the needs of that region. The issues that come from this, however, seem to be quite prominent. Right now, there exists states like Danzig and Riga, which, for all their boons, are ultimately just individual cities with some outlying townships. They, like every other state in the game, have a maximum of 25 possible building slots for growth and development. That means they are equal in development potential to the entirety of the states of California or Texas that also have a max potential of 25 building slots. Now, I'm sure the citizens of Danzig are delighted to know that they can be equal to Texas, but it is a tad silly. Another common issue is handling odd border disputes, both historical and ahistorical, meaning you can end up with states like Zalzi and Northern Epirus that feel precariously placed between historically accurate, yet completely unlike any of their larger surrounding states. The solution I hope to see going forward has actually already been done before by the wonderful Victoria 3. In Vicky 3, states are in general consistent in size and structure. There are no Danzigs being the same size as Texas is. Additionally, they are very malleable, meaning the actual state borders can shift and be divided, allowing for micronations to exist inside other states de jure, or de jure, and for you to create alternative borders without needing to create a middle state carved in between 2 other states to allow for a border change to happen. It would be great to see a similar system adopted for Ahoy 5, meaning Danzig could live on its days as an unincorporated state of Gdynia, and California can be broken up into much more realistically sized chunks. This is not including my small desire to also allow a treaty port option to smuggle its way in to Ahoy 5 as well. Multiplayer, multiplayer, multiplayer. I think one of the key bones that builds the back of Hoi 4's success is its prolific multiplayer community, and I would hope to see a Hoi 5 recognise and expand upon this. It seems to me there are currently 3 types of online playstyles. Normal, where players just click a nation and follow through with friends in a casual environment. Roleplay, where a series of rules and formats creates a more serious storytelling environment. And competitive, split somewhere between pre-made teams and the community-founded 1v1 competitions. Going forward, the support of Hoi's lobby systems could aim to accommodate the more alternative playstyles more. For example, consider a series of official maps to 1v1 other players on hosted lobbies, where you gain or lose points akin to ELO for your microwing skills. Alternatively, roleplay games could see more support in the various interactions between nations, such as the common diplomatic message system, which is much better than the finicky chatbox DMs, which is a popular mod seen for many online multiplayer games. If nothing else, I just feel I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the heart that exists within Hearts of Iron is the community and its multiplayer games, and if nothing else, we can all pray for a stable, no hot joining, no re-hosting, seamless multiplayer experience in a sequel. Right? As we head towards the end, I want to talk about the policy of appeasement. When talking about the build-up to World War II, we're often talking about the failures of World War I and how appeasement was used as a measure to straddle the line between lightening the punishment for countries like Germany while also buying time for the Allies to build up in the background. It is of course a hotly debated topic even today for its failures and potential upsides, but one thing that cannot be denied is that it was an effective diplomatic tool to get what you wanted in the 1930s. As such, I actually find it disappointing that the game doesn't take advantage of this historical reality more. In truth, it's something that could yet be applied to Hoi 4, but I believe that ship has long sailed. To give some examples, many focuses in the game would have you demand land from another nation, but typically this would have involved some kind of trade-off on your end, as seen with the Munich Agreement's piece of their time. When I justify for a state using the justification button, there's no negotiations, no back down period, just a ticking timer into a guaranteed conflict, assuming the nation in question hasn't been guaranteed themselves. It's interesting to say, but this is another positive of Victoria 3's justification system, where a back down and negotiation period can occur to allow you to get what you want without bloodshed. In a sequel, it would be nice to see opportunities where if I want to, for example, get Belize from the UK as Mexico, I don't need to just straight up war them. I can just offer them a pact or treaty where I promise not to join the Axis or support the Axis in any way throughout World War II. If I break that pact, then they get a free war goal on me. Equally, from the other perspective, if a minor nation demands, let's say, some core land from a colonial major, then a feature could be implemented where you could try and build some kind of treaty to ensure peace in the world by implementing restrictions maybe on their army, maybe on their navy, as a key policy of appeasement to reflect both the side of allowing aggressive nations to expand, as is what was happening historically, but also representing the Allies' willpower to prevent this collective enemy by trying to implement these blockades while they themselves are building up in the background. That is, of course, until America joins the stage, at which point you could have a nice transition through the Yalta Conference or something similar, signalling the end of this treaty period, and only unconditional surrender of all enemies will be the final conclusion. The last and perhaps most dividing topic I have been thinking about for a sequel is the impact of focus trees to the game. There's no doubt that focus trees have played a major part in the interest of the game, as they effectively allow for these arching storylines to follow through as you play throughout World War II. My perhaps controversial opinion is I feel they are too linear and too restrictive, and in the next game, while I wouldn't want to see their removal, I would like to see their use as effectively the central conduit of content delivery, be reduced. To expand on this a little, many focus trees would have you pick an ideology right at the start of the game, January 1936, and once that's been done, you are basically locked into that story path, whatever it is, from that point on. Very few nations in the game have enough freedom to actually allow you to design your own path forward. A few that kind of do this are Romania, with its switching side mechanics. You've got Mexico, with its open tree format with ideology basically just being the label, and Hungary, which perhaps accidentally allows you to flip ideology regardless of the path you've chosen. Going forward, I would like to see a slightly more Europa Universal-ish styled focus tree, where actions unlock focuses instead of focuses unlocking actions. If I hire a communist advisor, then that should unlock a branch of communist advisor focuses. If I choose to do those focuses, that may lead to a communist takeover of the government, instead of me taking the focus to go communist and then that unlocking the communist advisor. Your actions should beget the direction of the nation. If I create a spy agency, then you should start unlocking focuses about spying. If I find myself in a war, maybe I'm colonizing Africa, then a branch dedicated to conflict in Africa opens up, regardless of which nation I'm playing. Of course, there should remain core paths relevant to the nations being played. I mean, only Germany would have reason to do Rhineland, but as it stands right now, I always felt the focus trees are simply too static, relevant to the ideology they've chosen. They don't reflect what actually happens in reality. If you become a government in exile, few countries unlock a branch to deal with that. If you eventually capitulate and you're forced to become a puppet, there are even fewer branches to deal with that. I personally would love to see a more modular, highly reactive focus tree system that recognises what's actually happening in-game. If nothing else, we can at least lament on the fact that Hoi4 does have this to some degree, like with the Chili tree, which renames the focus devaluing the peso to devaluing the franc if you have a French monarchy. I guess that will have to do. And so, we have come to the end of this list of potential things I'd like to see explored in a Hearts of Iron sequel. This list was by no means exhaustive, with a metric ton of other things to consider, like the role of research, the expansion of characters' representations, and complexity of economies versus industry. Alas, I do not wish to make a 4-hour video, so let me sum up some key points I mentioned here. We had a strong base game release that has enough content to justify its purchase and support over Hoi4, an exploration into more features prior 1936 and or post 1944, having a larger map to develop certain combat centres more closely, such as cities, microstates and land corridors, ensuring a consistent and balanced reflection of world geography, with border geography being far more flexible, a renewed vigour towards multiplayer, its support and formats, a core feature dedicated to the treaty brokering, claim justifying, land expansionist coin of Appeasement, and a redesign on the more linear storytelling focus trees to allow more player freedom and a challenge reward basis. With that, I'll wrap things up. Thank you very much for watching. I'm sure there are some things in here you may have choice opinions on, and you're welcome to uproar me and tear me to pieces in the comments. If nothing else, I'm happy just to contribute and release my thoughts, because I do believe that Paradox considers concepts for their sequel too, and keeping an active mind towards it doesn't feel like a baseless activity. Regardless, if you liked this video, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, feel free to comment, and I'll see you all next time. Bye, 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 bye.